convinced himself he's got this under his thumb. But you pull on one little thread.
Vous êtes accusé du meurtre de votre fille Élise, âgée de 15 mois. Savez-vous pourquoi vous avez tué votre fille?
Je ne sais pas.
Bakbil, burada birliklərin işi mahana dalayacağız mərd. Ay mühendis yürüsənlər konuşur. Sən ana ay mühendis.
Timothée Chalamet serves up teen romance with a side of gore, a hard-hitting French courtroom drama inspired by true events, and Jafar Panahi defies the Iranian authorities once again with his latest virtuoso release. That's all coming up in today's film show. And for that, I'm joined by critic Ben Croll. Hi, Ben.
Well, hello.
Well, our first film this week takes us on an unconventional road trip across 1980s America with some very bloody twists and turns. Bones and all sees Timothée Chalamet reunited with his Call Me By Your Name director, Luca Guadagnino. And I've heard this described as a cannibal romance. Surely not.
I'm afraid to say, surely yes. There's no better description for this cannibal romance than a kind of a mad scientist Frankenstein of a movie. It takes the dark soul and bloody heart of a blood and guts horror movie and it puts it into the body of an airy teen romance. And so on the one side, you have the story of a kind of a teen loner, played by newcomer Taylor Russell, who meets her match, her romantic match, in the guise of another teen loner, a heartthrob, of course, played by Timothée Chalamet. And as they say, sparks fly, and then people die, because the reason that these teen loners have to drift from town to town, falling in love, of course, but drifting from town to town is because they are bloodthirsty cannibals. It's an over-the-top, grandiose film. You sort of have to see it to believe it, so let's take a look.
You look like the kind that's convinced himself he's got this under his thumb. But you pull on one little thread and...
I'm ready. My lord.
Okay, so in that clip, we see and hear from an actor who sounds a bit familiar.
It's Michael Stuhlbarg, who, of course, last seen opposite Timothée Chalamet, giving the most heartfelt speech a father has ever given his son in Call Me By Your Name. And as you can see from that clip, here he comes back as a malicious cannibal hillbilly. So this is really not Call Me By Your Name Part 2, nor is it supposed to be. It's a really wild ride. And you have to kind of appreciate the fact that it takes every single element incredibly seriously when it wants to go into this kind of American reverie, these romantic shots of the open road, these American grandeur. It feels like something out of a Bruce Springsteen song or Chloe Zhao's Nomadland. But then when it segues into horror mode, it becomes terrifying. I mean, this is a movie that takes its cannibalism very seriously. It takes guts. It quite literally takes guts. And it's a completely wild and over-the-top mix.
So I should imagine that some of the success of the film depends on how likable the cast are. How does Chalamet do here?
Well, you know, as I say, he's Chalameting. You know, one of the keys to the Call Me By Your Name success was the thrill of the new, the revelation of a new great actor. And I think that since that time, he's kind of coasted on his screen presence. And this is a screen presence that he brings out in full force in Bones and All. He's this kind of like dark dreamboat, a broody dreamboat. And I think fans of Chalamet are going to get what they pay for. But the real revelation is actress Taylor Russell. I mean, she's the real star of the film. And she would actually go on to win the Best Young Actress prize at the Venice Film Festival, where this film premiered. Luca Guadagnino would win the Best Director prize as well at this year's Venice Film Festival.
Okay, I must say the premise, the genre, Frankenstein, as you say, does sound intriguing. Well, we're moving...
It's Love Frankenstein. it's
Love Frankenstein, sorry. Well, we're moving from one Venice Prize winner to another. That is Alice Diop's Saint-Omer, which is out this week. It won the Silver Lion at this year's festival and will represent France at the Oscars. Let's take a look.
Vous êtes accusé du meurtre de votre fille Élise, âgée de 15 mois. Savez-vous pourquoi vous avez tué votre fille?
Je ne sais pas. J'espère que ce procès pourra me l'apprendre.
Et toi, Omer, ça avance, ton nouveau roman? Au fait, est-ce que tu pourras accompagner maman lundi?
Non, je peux pas.
Tu pourrais faire un effort quand même.
So Ben, as I said, this is the French entry for the Academy Awards. Do you think it could bag that prize?
I mean, it's tough to say. It's definitely not what you would call a conventional Oscar movie. And I think that actually makes the choice to, pick this film to represent France all the more refreshing. I mean, Saint-Omer is a challenging film about a difficult subject. It basically very lightly fictionalizes a very true story, a very true trial of a young immigrant mother who killed her 4-month-old baby. But the film is less about the act itself than about the trial and then the reactions that trial created in people who were watching it. Let's listen to what the filmmaker has to say about that.
Les questions que sont soulevées par Saint-Omer sont des questions qui...
The questions that are raised by Saint-Omer are questions that every woman, whether black or white, can ask themselves. Questions like what it means to make peace, to mourn, to fix things with our own mothers, to make peace with the girls we were. For me, these are questions that are shared, and that's what's striking about the real story. It allows one to take stock, and that's why I'm offering through this film. But I don't have all the answers, and the film is not there to answer all the questions.
L'opportunité de faire, mais après, j'ai pas toutes les réponses, et le film n'est pas là pour répondre à toutes les questions.
So what Alice Diop mentions there, they sound like quite universal questions, but this doesn't seem like a very conventional courtroom thriller.
No, I mean, it really isn't a conventional courtroom thriller. It sort of takes the premise of a courtroom drama and it turns it on its head. Diop trained in documentary, and a lot of her films do sort of take unconventional premises or take unconventional approaches to conventional premises. I think one of her first films was called The Death of a Danton. The other one was called Towards Tenderness. And both of those took place in the banlieue, and they sort of looked to find unexpected touches, moments of grace in stories and in subjects that were sort of treated with a more two-dimensional approach in previous films and previous approaches. And in Saint-Omer, she does a similar thing. She uses two non-professional actors, or she uses two actors that are not particularly well known anyway. There's Keiji Kagame playing a sort of stand-in for herself, a novelist who was watching the trial. And then there's Guslagi Malanda as the accused, who sort of speaks a series of very contradictory messages on the stand. And she shoots them in these very long, unbroken takes that really pull you into the moment, into the reality of the moment, in a way that feels very close to documentary.
As you mentioned, that background of hers in factual filmmaking, she's often known for using events or characters from her real life, and I believe there are echoes of her personal life here too.
Yeah, well, that's the very interesting thing about the film, is that it's somehow less about the trial, less about the question of the person's guilt or innocence, or even the character's eventual fate. You don't even find out whether this person is sentenced or not. And instead, the film is about the reaction of somebody in the room watching this. And this is an analog for director Alice Diop herself. It's a fascinating sort of character study where a woman watching another woman talk, you get to understand more about the woman watching than the actual woman speaking. It's a very conceptual and cerebral film that is extremely accomplished because it does something that you see more in literature than you see in film. It puts you into the head of a character and allows you to experience that world through their eyes.
And that is truly quite the challenge. Well, we move now to our next release, No Bears, from Iranian dissident director Jafar Panahi. Well, the filmmaker was arrested shortly after completing this film, which gives this latest feature a poignant edge. Let's take a look.
رفتیم ساخت مرزی ما اینجا محلی هستیم نمیریم اونجا میترسیم بریم اونجا راه هم نیست خیش هست تو خطر داره قام تو شهرسن دروس و آنها öldürürler
شو ظالم كرة خليك مدخل نظر دهاتون كان شغلهم آزادی منیه نقصان ایدی از فرسا چی؟
بابا خیشی وجود نداره اینا به ما یاد داده
It's impossible to separate fact and fiction in a film that is really about the impossibility of separating fact and fiction. Now, even without the fact that Panahi was arrested after making this film, this still would be a powerful, powerful piece of cinema and truly one of the most interesting films of the year. For the past 10 years, Panahi's made these films that are basically about his limitations. He's not allowed to get a real budget. He's not allowed to get a real crew. And so he makes films about his ability and his attempt to make these films. And with No Bears, he's found his most potent expression of those limitations. They say that great art comes from limitations. Well, here he's proven himself to be one of the great artists working in film today. The film is about him trying to make another film while dealing with the aftermath that his own presence in a small town creates. It's a really powerful piece of cinema. It has a no-budget aesthetic and a novelistic sprawl. It's proof of his talent. Proof of his power, proof of his talent, and proof that everyone in the international scene needs to do what they can to free Jafar Panahi.
Indeed, he has shown a breathtaking creativity in recent years. Now, finally, we're wrapping up the show with Our Ties. This is directed by also actor Rushdie Zem, co-written by Mai Wen. Tell us about this film. Zem called it his most personal yet.
It is his most personal film because, of course, it deals with a family story from Zem's own family. The film co-stars Rushdie Zem's daughter, playing the daughter of the lead character of the film. But that lead character is actually not played by Rushdie Zem. That's played by Sami Bouadjila, who plays Musa. He is a middle-aged pushover who suffers a very traumatic brain injury and turns from pushover to, let's call him a hard A. Somebody who takes no guff. And it's the kind of format that could work just as easily as like a very light, frilly 1990s Jim Carrey comedy, or as something very dark and brooding, a family tearjerker. And here, Rushdie Zem kind of splits the difference. He makes, in his own way, his own kind of Frankenstein of a film. It's a little bit of a comedy. It's a little bit of a drama. It's a little bit of a Mai Wen film because he wrote the film with Mai Wen, the actor and director behind DNA, behind Police, and it is somehow Mai Wen light. There are all those scenes of kitchen table combat, this cacophony, boisterous families that are talking over one another, pushing and pulling. It's a fun way to spend an afternoon.
Lots of different ingredients coming into play there.
It's a hodgepodge. It's a potpourri.
Let's leave you with that then, Ben. Thank you so much for this week's roundup. We'll leave you with a clip of Our Ties. And do remember, you can get more movie news on our website and our social media channels. There's more news coming up on France 24 just after this.
Sur une échelle de 0 à 6, pour ce qui est de la fatigue.
4.
Pour ce qui est de l'impulsivité, et la colère, l'agressivité.
Je te baise.
Quoi?
3.
Pour ce qui est de la tristesse.
6.
Tu te sens vraiment triste? C'est un trauma crânien franchement grave. Il s'est passé quoi au juste?
C'est-à-dire qu'en fait, il a eu un choc derrière, mais la bosse, elle est devant.
Je vais vous proposer un traitement nouveau. Et puis, il faut qu'il soit bien entouré sur le plan affectif.